This is Radio mnartists. I'm Marya Morstad. Mary Britton Clouse, BFA in painting and printmaking from SUNY at Buffalo, and her MA in lithography at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque under Garro and Trejan. She and her husband Albert worked at numerous limited edition print studios in New Mexico, including the Tamarind Institute of Lithography. They operate a small private book and paper repair practice, Book and Paper Artifacts, in Minneapolis. For several years, her animal advocacy work took precedence over her artistic career. Since 1990, she served as president of the Minnesota-based Animal Rights Coalition and founded other organizations, including Minnesota Spay-Neuter Project, Legislative Efforts for Animal Protection, and most recently, Chicken Run Rescue and Justice for Animal Arts Guild. Clouse's work has always involved animal imagery. Current work incorporates drawing, painting, sculpture, photography, and installation, combined with authentic artifacts like eating utensils and cages, restraint devices, or tools used to mutilate or control animals. Recent work includes portrait photographs, paintings, and sculptures about real birds she has rescued and rehabilitated, which number nearly 200 since 2001, blurring the lines between portrait and self-portrait. Her most recent exhibits were Bird by Bird Reader's Art at Susan Hensel Gallery and Wings at the Hopkins Center for the Arts. Once you become familiar with the art and animal activism of Mary Britton Clouse, you may just become a vegetarian yourself. Known as the Chicken Lady, she and her husband live in North Minneapolis with their brood of birds, chickens, and roosters.
As a kid, I had a very close relationship with my animals and was constantly drawing animals. So it was natural when I did get to the University of Buffalo, majored in art and continued with the animal imagery there. Moved on to the University of New Mexico, where I received my master's degree in printmaking. And again, the animal imagery remained strong, but I still didn't understand my personal connection in a larger worldview until I got to Minnesota and actually became informed and involved in animal advocacy here in Minnesota. The nature of that advocacy really kind of displaced my activities in the studio. I had burnt out basically from graduate school and then subsequently working as a professional hand printer in lithography studios, and supplanted all of that time and energy with my work in various animal organizations, and most recently Chicken Run Rescue and Justice for Animals Arts Guild. That's the nature of my involvement, was ultimately finding a way to connect my artistic needs to my needs to be useful to the animals. The background for the Justice for Animals Arts Guild was a realization that there was an increasing tendency to use live and dead animal parts in performance art and also in visual arts, and there had been numerous instances here in Minnesota that have put us on the map for the good or the ill. So I got together with a few other local artists who also were animal advocates, and we discussed the need for, one, supporting each other's work, and two, trying to find inroads to elevate the level of debate about using animals as inanimate objects for exhibition purposes. The animal imagery in my older work is, kind of personal and subjective. Didn't have any kind of a political awareness. When I did become politically aware about what happens to animals in animal agriculture in particular, research was another issue that I was real interested in. Then it became clearer to me that there was a story not being told, and I began to look at ways to tell that story but still staying very rooted in personal experience. And so as I educated myself as an activist, I found those areas to be very fertile ground for artistic expression and to develop pieces that actually incorporated my activism into the artwork. So the crossover was gradual, and as I developed as an activist, I discovered that I had a lot more interesting things to say as an artist as well. One of the first pieces where I actually incorporated documentation into an art piece was as I documented what happened with a starvation case. 70 dairy cows had been starved to death in Scott County. And I followed the case through the court system with the intention of documenting that to teach myself really what happened with an outrageous act of cruelty towards a farm animal. And I followed the case through and acquired documents, both evidentiary photographs from the sheriff's department and statements from the perpetrators of the crime, and developed it into a sculpture that documented how the case unfolded and actually incorporated my own correspondence and the legal documents that went along with it, as well as the photographs. And then I entered that in the Minnesota State Fair and won a merit award for it. So, all the way through that project, it really, right from the very beginning, the need for personal experience tying me to the incident, and then the facts, the actual documents that, showed me that I was not interpreting, I was, basing it on a real situation, and then being able to create something artistically that would be taken to, if you will, the source of the problem, which is the Minnesota State Fair, which is basically that exists to glorify the agricultural community of Minnesota. And an interesting step beyond that piece was in acquiring the evidentiary photographs. I bound them into an album, which I later lobbied the legislature for stronger animal cruelty laws. So I was able to use the actual photographs from that cow starvation case at the legislature. So it was a really interesting transition from an incident to concept and back to incident, if you will. The way people come to vegetarianism is always a really interesting thing because everyone has a different story. In my husband's and my particular case, there was a KTCA aired the Animals film, which was a film that was produced in the, I believe it was the late 70s, that showed very graphically, the institutionalized cruelty that American culture, actually worldwide culture, is based on. And we became vegetarians that very night. More recently, I saw Ira Glass of This American Life interviewed on David Letterman, and he revealed that because of his contact with Karen Davis of United Poultry Concerns, who is a quintessential animal advocate and chicken advocate, he met her, he went to her sanctuary, he met her chickens, and he confirmed to David Letterman that he had become a vegetarian after that meeting. So it's always fascinating to know what it is that touches a person and causes them to make that connection and to make a change in their life to, ethical eating. The reason that chickens have become such a focal point for my work is that in reality, the way animals are treated is always going to be predicated on their use as food animals, and chickens represent basically 98% of all animals slaughtered for food worldwide. So if you really wanted to focus on the underdog of all underdogs, that would be chickens. And there was a personal inroad at a time when Minneapolis Animal Control had some chickens that needed to be placed. I stepped in, and it was just kind of a confluence of a number of things that related to chickens that got me thinking about ways that I could be effective as a city dweller and still addressing food animal issues. And then getting to know the chickens and learning about them fed a lot of the creative ideas that I had in terms of my work. Human portraiture, it's never questioned, and it never seems to go out of style. I mean, you look at a David Hockney or you look at a Chuck Close, it never goes out of style. But what's interesting is that the science has now shown us that the degree of sentience that animals have ought to entitle them to be portrayed with the same depth and individuality. And it's been kind of a tough go to, find a way that my depictions of chickens don't just look like generic chickens. And so that's really been part of the challenge is expressing that they are just every bit as much individuals as humans are, and finding ways to express that. There's always a kind of a suspicion or distrust of art that has a particular political viewpoint, but I found that it's almost always accepted if the advocacy has something to do with a human plight, a feminist issue or a racial issue or a disability issue, a gender issue. And to me, speciesism is just another ism. It's maybe the last ism, and I really don't think that a separate set of standards ought to be applied to, work that involves advocacy for animals that is any less significant or validated than any other advocacy art.
Radio mnartists is brought to you by mnartists.org, a project of the Walker Art Center and the McKnight Foundation, and KFAI Fresh Air Radio.